You're listening to Your Magical Midlife. This podcast is for women who are seekers, dreamers, and out-of-the-box thinkers. If you're a Gen X woman who never quite fit in, and probably never will, listen up. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and coach, and I'm here to guide you through the expansive, exhilarating, and sometimes exhausting crossroads that we find ourselves in at midlife. Whether you're a seasoned listener or just joining the adventure, think of this podcast as your hot pink convertible cruising down the highway of change. Together we'll navigate the sometimes baffling backroads of midlife and collect all the cool souvenirs along the way. Get in and buckle up. Our map may have flown out the window miles ago, but that doesn't mean we aren't going to have a blast. Let's hit the road and discover the magic just around the bend. Wiley Women is a wellness brand that wants you to live your best midlife. Developed by a naturopath, they offer tinctures, supplements, and drink mixes. Wiley uses plant medicine and clinical studies to demystify and embrace the hormonal powers and hidden complexities of grown women from the inside. Female formulated and female founded. Plus, they offer free shipping and easy returns. I love the Unworried tincture, which has bacopa, holy basil, passion flower, and reishi. It helps calm my body and stops the spinouts. It reduces jitters and lightens my mood. Go to www.wileywomen.com and use code KATEH2O at checkout to get 20% off. That's www.wileywomen.com and use code KATEH2O for 20% off. Kit Messick is an archivist, horse enthusiast, and world-traveling adventurer. She and I met almost 30 years ago, gogo-ing back-to-back in some of New York City's biggest clubs. We were goth girls together, we were Mermaid Parade participants together, and she was my first friend to go through menopause. I'm bringing her on the show today to talk about spirituality, our growth, and also how she became queen of the Crone age.
I'm Kit Messick, and I have known Kate for a very long time. We have run around New York together since we were in our late teens, early 20s. We've had sundry misadventures, lots of inappropriate footwear, lots of glitter in uncomfortable places. I am working as an archivist. That has been my career of choice. I've been at New York Public Library and the Getty Research Institute. Now I'm at Smith College. And throughout it all, Kate and I have been buds.
We met in our mutual goth phases, go-going back-to-back, side-by-side at some of the biggest nightclubs in New York. A little bit about the 90s and the club scene and those wild days.
I actually started working as a Miss Kitty's girl on New Year's Eve, 92 into 93 at the Limelight, which was, to me, that was like Mecca. I had grown up reading all the Star Hits and Bop and all those magazines and seeing how Duran Duran used to party at the Limelight. So it was a personal goal of mine to go to this place where Duran Duran had been. And as soon as I got there, I felt like I had arrived. But I look back now and I see that I was this 18-year-old girl from Columbus, Ohio, who is now in the big city and seeing things that I had never seen before.
Yes.
All sorts of things that I didn't know could be done with the human body. And I just remember thinking to myself, act cool, act like you've seen it, don't look shocked, just look cool. So my 90s experience can largely be summed up by trying to look completely unfazed while being confronted with things that were clearly out of my experience.
See, I didn't even realize that you were supposed to act nonchalant or cool. And I grew up technically in New York City on Staten Island, but Staten Island is so sheltered. And I was so sheltered that I would wander around the Limelight or Palladium or wherever, and someone would offer me drugs, and I'd be like, oh, like, oh no, thank you. I don't do coke. Oh no, no, thank you. Oh no, thank you. Or, or, or if someone handed me a flyer for another event, I thought like I must be really cool
Yeah.
because they're handing me a flyer.
Yep.
Meanwhile, they were like, they knew they had to get rid of their stack. Was when eventually when I started handing out flyers, I knew that I was being paid to hand out
Yep.
all 350 flyers that were handed to me.
True facts.
Hand it to anybody that will take it. Yeah. It didn't mean I was special or cool or anything.
It was fun to be deluded.
It was fun to it. Definitely, definitely was. Do you still listen to any of those old musics?
I do, although actually one of the last things I did before I moved out of LA last year was go to see The Cure at the Hollywood Bowl with a couple friends of mine. And I had told myself I was done seeing The Cure. I'd seen them, like I'd followed them around in Europe. I had done that whole thing, but they put on such a spectacular show, and it was so great to see that men of a certain age can still get up there and like really make fantastic music, and they sounded really tight, and so that was a really great note to leave LA on.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you how did he look and how did they sound?
Well, he kind of looks like a grandmother, um, but I think a lot of people would probably argue that we don't love Robert Smith for his looks.
Right. Right.
But he really, I think he's in on it. I got the distinct impression that he's a self-aware kind of guy, and he leans into the image, but that he does not take himself all that seriously. The music, however, I think he takes very seriously, and
Yeah.
it sounded great.
That's amazing. So, one of the reasons why I brought you on is to talk a little bit about magic, because you are my OG woo-woo friend. You were woo-woo before anybody else. And talk to me a little bit about your experiences, especially like it's Starwood, right? Like not Stargate.
Yes,
Talk to me about
Starwood.
Starwood and the people you met there. And now you're probably the age of some of the people you were like, oh.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Talk about your Starwood experience for those who don't know.
So Starwood is this fantastic pan-pagan festival. At the time I was going, it was being held in Sherman, New York. Now I believe it is in a different location. I had found out about it. I had become involved with kind of a pagan study grove that was operating out of Enchantments, which was an occult store that I assume is still up and running in the East Village.
It's still there.
And it was a great community for me. I learned a lot, and it was one of those stores you just like hanging out at because people would have interesting conversations, and the people that worked there were interesting, and it was a great vibe. And all these people kept talking about, oh yeah, I'm going to Starwood next year. I'm going to Starwood next year. And I kept saying, what is this Starwood? What is this Starwood? So that began a multiple yearly run of going to Starwood and camping. And I guess I would describe it as it's probably closer in spirit to a rainbow gathering than to Burning Man. And we're talking like a few hundred people, not thousands of people. And we were out camping, and it was lovely. And there were substances that were fun. And there was drumming every night, and it culminated at the end of the week in this massive bonfire that was just an absolute delight. It really was kind of just a Disneyland for pagan adults. There was also kind of a chaos magic contingent that I had people that I had met online, and they were kind of the elder statesmen. They were a little more mature, they were a little more thoughtful, and I learned a lot from them as well. And so that I think has really been a strong influence in my personal tradition. One of the reasons that I could never really get on board with like traditional Wicca so much was because it had the same kind of organizational tendencies that mainstream religions had that were not appealing to me. And you kind of hope when you seek out alternative spirituality that you're going to find something different. And the longer I was involved with Wicca, I was finding a lot of the same frustrations and clannishness and politics that drove me away from Christianity.
I feel
Um,
the same thing. I was very turned off when I was first exploring my spirituality. I went to a couple of events and people were talking about what level they were and who was in charge.
yeah,
And
exactly.
if I wanted to be attached to who was in charge, I would have stayed Catholic,
Yeah, exactly.
stayed right there in my Catholicism. But what do you think of the mainstreaming of alternative spirit? Like everybody calls themselves a witch now. What do you
I'm a little ambivalent, and I want to be very careful that I don't sound like I'm gatekeeping, because
Right.
that's not where my concern is coming from. On the one hand, I absolutely fully embrace, anybody that's seeking out their spiritual path. So on that, in that sense, I think it's fantastic, and I think that there are a lot of communities, especially communities of color, who have been kind of systematically cut off from their traditional spiritual practices, and they're reclaiming those, and that's really potent and really powerful and really important. The downside, however, is I think it's because of kind of the moment that we're in culturally, where social media and the reign of the influencers is all anybody can seem to talk about. It becomes very easy for people to just throw on a cool filter on their TikToks and call themselves a witch and say that they know how to do a spell for this, that, or the other, and have all these young, impressionable followers that are just going to be like, oh yeah, that woman knows what's up, and rather than seeking for themselves what is important to them.
Do you feel like you're at that crone phase yet?
I totally do, but I think a lot of that is because of my work environment. I'm suddenly working with college students, with undergrads. So to them, I am a crone. I am older in a lot of cases than these people's parents. So in that way, yeah, I am stepping into the crone role. Career wise, I'm also in a good place. All the years of hard work and experience are paying off, and it just so happens that this is happening as I'm aging. So I think it's natural to feel like, okay, yep, I'm the crone.
See,
My time has come.
I feel like I'm at some weird in between. Neither one of us had kids, so I was in that mothering phase. I was in that phase of life and I didn't have a child. I feel like I'm just stepping into my power now, you know? I feel like I'm not even really sure what I was doing with the last 20 years of my life in a lot of ways. And I'm just taking those steps now. So I feel like I'm in sort of a queen or an empress phase between the mother and the crone.
I like that.
You like that?
I like
Like
that.
to be a crone, you have to be fully wise and embodied. And I feel like I'm not quite there yet.
I guess I had not thought that there could be an extra step in there. So okay, I'm gonna say, yeah, I'm in my empress phase, heading rapidly towards crondom.
Heading rapidly towards crondom. How do you feel about aging? Having been I mean, you are still to me a very glamorous person. You were a go-go dancer. I was a go-go dancer in the big clubs, right? There was a certain ego boost to that. There was a cachet to that. There was a social
Sure.
currency that we had, right? We were cute, we were young, we wore crazy outfits, we got
Yeah.
some attention there. We were mermaids. We did the mermaid parade every year together for like a decade?
Yeah.
And we were pretty fucking foxy back
Yeah.
then. Do you still feel foxy?
Is it weird to say that I don't really think about it as
No,
much? In a
no.
lot of ways, because I've had various not terribly serious injuries and health issues along the way. I've taken some bumps and bruises. I'm more concerned with my body just kind of being as functional as possible. And the lifestyle that I have right now that kind of revolves around being outside as much as possible, or, lifting heavy boxes when I'm at work. I'm so much more interested in what is practical, and I think that's kind of a discouraging. But there does reach a point where suddenly what is comfortable and practical is just so much more appealing than what is cool and sexy. So I think some people might file that away under giving up. I don't. I think it's just about reorienting to what's important to me. And currently, comfort and practicality are far more comfortable and interesting to me than the go-go boots with the 8-inch heels that you and I used to wear back in the day.
I still have some of those shoes. I put them on and I stand up in them and I'm like, ah,
Yep.
ouch. And I take them right off. Like, I can't even fathom the fact that I wore those, clumped down out of my apartment, my 4th floor walk up, walked to the subway, went down the subway stairs, up the stairs, blocks to the Limelight, up those stairs all night, dancing, walking, go-going on the thing, off the box, on the box, like up the stairs, down the stairs, like, and then home. And I wore those shoes for like 8 hours at a time.
Yep. I have this amazing memory in a corset. I have this incredible memory of one of the mermaid parades that we did. And after the parade, we went back to your apartment. And at this point, my boots were just shot. The heel was breaking off. I mean, they were just shot. And they had already seen like a whole lot of life. They had done their job. Thank you for your service. And so when I took them off and we got back to your apartment, I left them with the garbage like outside in front of your apartment on the street. And while we were hanging out before I left to go home, we saw a teenage girl walk up to them, pick them up, try one on, grab the other one, and just go scooting away. And it was just like, yep, good luck and Godspeed, children. Like, that's like the handoff has been made, the torch has been passed. I hope you're able to glue that heel back on before you try and dance in them. But it was very heartwarming to feel like, okay, I passed on the impractical footwear to the next generation.
Oh my goodness. What happened to all your stuff, all your club gear, all your mermaid stuff?
Most of that, I still have a couple of mermaid artifacts, but most of that stuff sadly either got sold or pitched before I moved to LA because I just did not want to move it across the country.
Where's the Wonder Woman? Where's the Wonder Wheel headdress?
Wonder Wheel headdress is still packed up.
Yes, you still have it.
Yes, that is one of the artifacts that remained.
Just for the listeners, Kit, myself, and our friend Jenny were the 3 iconic rides for one of the mermaid parades. So Kit was the Wonder Wheel, Jenny was the Cyclone, and I was the parachute jump. And we won that year. We won the mermaid parade. It was like the best year ever.
It was amazing.
And
I think I probably did permanent nerve damage. I made that headdress out of
an erector set.
An erector set, and it was really heavy. And I did not stop to think about how wearing like 5 pounds of metal on top of my head, like precariously perched on top of a little like hat shell, was gonna make my neck feel by the end of the day. So I wonder if I have shortened my practical life by wearing impractical headgear. Worth it.
Totally worth it. Do you ever wear anything impractical now? Or no?
Not really.
No?
Sadly, no, not really.
I don't think it's sad. I think it's good to give yourself the space to develop and grow and change and evolve.
I suppose it could also depend on your definition of impractical.
No.
Things like chaps that people might think are fairly impractical, but to me they serve a purpose.
Yes, tell the listeners about your equine adventures and why you would be wearing chaps.
I'm a lifelong horse person. I started riding when I was maybe first grade-ish.
First grade?
Yeah, so my dad and I were involved in this YMCA father-daughter group, and we went on a camp out, also with air quotes, because this was at like a YMCA owned campground where there was just a giant lodge and we all slept in beds and there was a fire. I was ready for tents and things that went bump in the night and campfires. And no, it was a crappy cot in a big room with a bunch of other girls. And I felt misled when we were driving home, one of the dads saw a sign for pony rides at some farm, off the next exit kind of a thing, and made this executive decision that we were all going to go on these pony rides. So we did. And it was one of those little nose to tail walk for half an hour kind of things. So I kind of got high on my sense of adventure there. And as we were coming back to the barn, it must have been dinner time, and my chubby little pony must have been able to hear the sound of the grain going into his bucket, because he just took off like a shot and ran right back into his stall, stuck his head in the speed bowl, which I thought was great. And everybody else was horrified that I'd been like, quote, run away with. And I was like, that's it. I want to ride horses. And, here I am at 50. I've been a horse owner. I've been a horse leaser. I've competed. I've done a lot of stuff with varying degrees of success.
I mean, it's a big part of your life. I mean, you spent time on a ranch, like was it an actual dude ranch?
Oh no, in Wyoming, we were out in the open. We were on Bureau of Land Management land, no fences.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like you do a big horse trip every year, is that right?
Every year that my finances will allow, I will do it.
And you've ridden in Africa, you've ridden in Spain, you've ridden in Ireland, is that right? You've ridden in Montana. Tell us about the best riding adventure that you've had.
It's kind of a toss up and they overlap. On the one hand, my multiple trips to Wyoming have been truly formative. I have made lifelong friends. I have made really important mentors, both horsemanship mentors and life mentors. This is also how I started to meet much older women that I became friends with. And these were the first older female friends that I had that weren't family members, because you can love your aunties as much as you like, but they're still, at the end of the day, they're still your aunties. They're still that kind of familial connection. And the relationship is still aunt and child rather than peer. So meeting older women in Wyoming on these rides and really having them relate to me as a peer rather than as a young relative was revelatory. And a lot of those women joined with me to go to Mongolia a couple of years ago. And that was probably the wildest riding experience I've had. And that was a point-to-point ride. So we were packing up our camp every night or every morning when we got up and riding all day and setting up camp and drinking water out of pure filtered water out of ridiculously frigid mountain streams and hearing wolves at night. And it was really just kind of the ultimate adventure for me.
I mean, it sounds absolutely amazing. So Mongolia was the biggest, wildest, most adventurous one you've been
so far.
So far. And you are sometimes with women who are much older than you.
Yes.
And is that inspiring? Is that
absolutely
talk to me about badass older women who are riding horses in Mongolia?
One of my dear riding friends and mentors is coming up on
80
and still owns a horse, and she still rides like the dickens. She's just phenomenal. She's got a sharp tongue and a sharp sense of humor and wild stories to share about her life experiences. And she's just an absolute gem, but realizing that like, oh, I don't have to stop riding when I'm 50 or 60 or 70 or 80. Like I can keep doing this. I mean, say what you will about Queen Elizabeth, whether or not you're a fan of the monarchy, that woman was riding her fell ponies pretty much up until the day she died. It's if it's in your blood, you will find a way to do it for as long as you possibly can.
Is horseback riding hard on your body?
Oh yeah. Every serious injury
anything about
I've had has been horse related.
All right, tell us about that, because I don't know anything about this really.
Well, eventually you fall off. It's just eventually you're going to fall off at some point or another.
Is it an inevitability that you're going to fall?
I feel like it. I feel like it's just kind of a numbers game, and if you ride enough times, there's going to be that time where whether it's the horse gets spooked or the horse can just trip over its own feet, and if you're not ready and agile, you might just go right over his shoulder. Like it just, it happens. And when you add things like jumping or doing cross country, that will increase the potential for injury.
Do they teach you how to fall? Or is that something you learn as you go?
I remember learning how to do an emergency dismount, and I know that there are some places and trainers that will teach you how to fall. That is a thing. I have not gotten formal training. I just have cold hard experience.
How many times have you fallen or been thrown off a horse? Guess.
Many times.
Many times. Okay.
I honestly can't guess many.
And you're not afraid to ride?
Oh no, I definitely have fear. I had a serious enough injury that I had to have, I tore my hip labrum. Oof. And had to have that surgically re-anchored to my acetabulum. And I was out of the saddle for over a year. And unfortunately, it's a really tricky injury to heal because there's not really much of a blood supply to the tendon or your fascia. There's just not really an active blood supply there. So the healing is very, very slow. And unfortunately, that has really, really taken a toll on my confidence. I really hadn't jumped since the accident. Partially because of fear, and partially because I have a lot of residual pain. And it's really, when you're already anxious about something and then there's a physical signal saying, hey, don't do that. So the point is to kind of regain my confidence and like not let the accident be the defining factor in my relationship with riding.
Yeah, but I think that's also a metaphor for aging in general, right? Is all these things happen to us between the time that we're young. I don't think you even think about getting hurt or taking big risks when you're younger. At least I didn't. I don't think you did either. I think we just lived these not reckless lives, but like really adventurous lives. And you're not really thinking about the outcomes of it. And then when you get older and you've had enough bad things happen, you become more fearful. And it sounds like riding a horse and pushing yourself and the discipline of getting back up and getting back on. And I have to get back up. I have to get back on. I'm going to go. It teaches you resiliency, which I think is a really important thing to have as we age, because hard things happen, and more hard things happen to us as we get older, just physically, emotionally. You have losses, you lose your parents, you get sick, you have illnesses, your partner has illnesses, you've had enough bang arounds at your job. And I just think building resiliency, emotional, physical, spiritual resiliency, is vital to having an excellent midlife and beyond.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's about showing up. I'm gonna hate myself for saying this, but you got to get right back up on the horse. It's true. You got to show up.
No matter
we
what.
can do hard things, and it's okay that they're hard, and it's okay that we falter. It's all about continuing to show up.
Yeah, I'm gonna loop it back to the fact that we both started out in like the goth scene. I think that subculture isn't about being resilient, right? At all. It's about staying down in it and loving it, like loving being in it.
I have my hands stapled to my forehead. Whoa.
Yeah. How did you become so like optimistic and resilient and fun after being so mopey and depressed and filled with having ennui be a lifestyle?
There's kind of a dichotomy there. Like, yes, on the one hand, it is a scene that we were all kind of reveling in our mope, but we also had great friendships and great times. And when I think back to those times, I think mostly about kind of like the ludicrous situations that we got ourselves in. For example, trying to get home from where was it?
We were at
Mother in the middle of a blizzard, when there were no cabs and there was already like 6 inches of snow on the ground, and you're teetering through the snowdrifts and your giant platform heels. I had the foresight to bring my Converse low tops to switch into. But we had a good time, and I think it was a lot of those friendships helped draw me out of ennui as a lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The physical injuries from the horseback riding, I think I always attribute any ache and pain I have to poorly worn, poorly fitting, cheap goth footwear or cheap burlesque footwear, whatever I was wearing at the time. But you've been thrown a couple of times. And how do you take care of your body to keep yourself in good shape, physically, flexibility wise? Because it takes a lot of strength to ride, especially if you're going to ride for a month at a time across Mongolia.
Oh, it was only like 10 days. It wasn't.
Oh, it was only 10 days in Mongolian. Okay, sorry, in the Mongolian desert.
Well, I did kind of make the determination after Mongolia that I will do cold weather trips or I will do camping trips, but I got a little too stiff and achy with the combination of cold weather camping trips. So there are points where you just realize, yeah, you know what, I'll do one or the other, but not both. Core strength, back strength, glute strength for me with my hip problems, having a stable glute system is really critical. I really, really love feeling strong. I don't care about how my body looks. I care about how it functions, and I care about how it feels. And when I feel like I'm strong, I'm just generally happier. So having that strength is really motivating. I really need to make sure that I'm doing other things to keep my fitness level up, because I'm going to Botswana again with a bunch of these fantastic men and women that I've met on my various riding adventures, going in late September. And I will not be in a position to be in the saddle for 8 hours a day until that time. So I've got to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to keep myself fit and strong for that.
Yeah, it is really important that we maintain our flexibility, our spiritual, our emotional, and our physical flexibility,
Yes.
and our strength as we get older. I see my only living parent, my dad, the fact that his body is just like, he's so stiff and he's so fragile. And I see him in contrast to the elderly people who are some of whom are my neighbors down here in Florida. And you really can go either way. And a lot of it's a decision of how well you take care of yourself. So
Yeah, absolutely.
it's all about, I don't want to be like an elderly person who can't lift a 20-pound bag of groceries.
Yeah.
You know, it's really a frightening thing to see. It's really important that we're making these decisions now about how we're going to be when we're 80.
Yeah.
Like you're making really good ones. And I'm trying to make really good ones too.
Anything that we can do to keep ourselves physically strong, to keep our own like social networks intact as much as possible, so that we don't have to rely on strangers to haul our groceries up 6 flights of stairs.
Absolutely. What is your vision for yourself when you're 85? Like, where do you want to be living? What kind of, do you want to live in like the community I'm gonna build? Of
I'm
like,
totally down for the tiny house community. I think it's becoming more common in France, and I think in Germany as well, for like these widows communes. These older women who have lost their partners enter into these kind of cooperative housing arrangements with varying degrees of autonomy. It's not commune per se, but there is some expectation of interdependence. And maybe you're responsible for cooking a meal once a week, or you're going to do the groceries for your floor that week or whatever. Because statistically, we do know that women are probably more likely to outlive their partners and to not have the resources to care for themselves, at least in this country. So I really do love that idea of having kind of a cooperative space. I think I'm too much of an introvert to want to be living right on top of people and to have to interact, but having a community that I know will help support me and I can help support it is a very interesting idea to me.
yeah, you're gonna be part of my little tiny house village. I can feel it. Absolutely. Absolutely. So another reason why I brought you on is to talk a little bit about menopause. Can you
Mhm.
tell us about your experience with menopause?
Yeah, so my experience is fairly different from most of my peers, and that is that I had premature ovarian failure at 35, which I only knew about because my husband and I had determined that we were not going to have children. So I decided I wanted to get off of hormonal birth control and get an IUD. So I got the IUD, and then my period just never came back. And so I called the doctor, and he said, "Well, you've been on the pill for a while. It could take some time for your system to restart. But meanwhile, I'm pretty much like I should have bought stock in pregnancy test kits because I was going through so many of them because I was so paranoid that I could be pregnant. They did a whole battery of tests and determined that nope, it was just that my ovaries had closed up shop. And the gynecologist basically said there's no telling when this actually happened because the pill kind of gives you this false period, that so you would not have thought that anything had changed. At the time I was seeing a male gynecologist who was delightful. I had absolutely no qualms about him, but there was the hard push for, okay, so we should probably talk about freezing your eggs. I said, no, absolutely not. Like that is not part of the plan. And his next thought was, well, we should probably put you back on the pill then, because then you'll continue to have that false period, so you won't feel out of sync with your peers. And that's what really drove home that, okay, yeah, this is definitely only somebody that has never had a period would say this, because that was the big upside to early menopause for me, was that I was no longer going to have to deal with having a period. So the idea of like, oh, let's put you back on the pill so you can look like your friends, it's like, are you kidding me? Absolutely not.
But was it in any way like anxiety provoking or isolating to have reached menopause before anybody else was even thinking about it? Any of us?
Not really, oddly enough. I had a whole lot of questions, and it's clear that we do not get much information about menopause. We are not talked to about menopause. I think that's starting to change, which is phenomenal. But I remember my big panic was, okay, like, so if I'm no longer producing estrogen, am I going to wake up in 6 months and look old and wrinkly? I'm 35. Am I suddenly going to look 70? Is my hair going to turn gray? And of course, he laughed and thought that was funny. It was like, no, no, you're not. But it was just like, don't laugh. This is like,
Right.
nobody has talked to me about menopause. Like,
Right.
maybe if I were like 45 instead of 35, you would have said something, but like, help a girl out. I have never felt like it was a shameful secret. I have never shied away from discussing it. It was emotionally, it was a little frustrating. And I know some people might find this hard to understand, given that I had made a conscious decision to not have children. That was not a choice that I intended to ever make. But having that choice taken from you still hurts. It made me feel like I had less agency, which I know sounds bizarre,
It does.
or
I felt that way.
counterintuitive, but
I felt that way after my hysterectomy, even though I was past the point of probably being able to have a child anyway. It was still like, well, it does now. It feels like it's entirely out of my control.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Have there been any like health ramifications for you? I know that there is some like scientific debate about what happens if you go through menopause earlier than normal or whatever. Any like extra?
The biggest concerns are heart disease and osteoporosis, and that's controlled with hormone replacement therapy. Basically, as long as my body is getting a reasonable enough amount of estrogen and progesterone, then I won't have to worry about these things.
And how do you feel generally?
Generally pretty good.
Yeah.
I still sleep like crap, but I don't think that that's necessarily hormonal.
Yeah.
I think I'm just a bad sleeper.
But you had like the hot flashes before anybody else.
That sucked, man.
Before any of like your peers knew what you were fucking talking about.
The hot flashes and the night sweats, I mean, literally just waking up in a pool, like, what the hell is happening? This sucks. And for me, the hot flashes were always accompanied by nausea. And I liken it to like when you're on a roller coaster and you're ticking up to that first big drop, and you know it. So like I would feel my internal furnace kick in. You could almost hear the whoosh of like the flame catching. And then it was just kind of like, oh no, it's oh boy, here it comes. Oh boy, get ready. Here it comes. And then you hit that top of the hill and the roller coaster starts careening down. And it's just like, oh God, gotta ride it out. Oh.
And you're that is no longer happening, correct?
Nope. I am happily controlled with ridiculously expensive hormone replacement. That's kind of to go back to my horse life again. Premarin is the first line of defense or first line of treatment for menopause. It is cheap. It is readily available. It is generic. It's easy. However, Premarin stands for pregnant mare urine, and it's the hormones are synthesized from mare's urine.
Oh,
and they can only do that if the horse is pregnant. So basically, and they use draft horses, and they're kept in with catheters in straight stalls and impregnated. And as a horse person, I just could not, and unfortunately, at the time that I first went into menopause, there just really were not many options besides Premarin because it's cheap, it's effective, like it works, and it's there, and it's generic. So I have a transdermal patch, and I continue to pay out the nose for it just on principle. And I really hope that someday there will be a generic version.
is it like a bioidentical, or is it?
Yes.
So it's bioidentical.
Yes.
Which is why it's more expensive because insurances don't cover.
Yes.
Oh, okay. These drug companies, they are the worst. They are really the worst. The worst. It's probably not it's probably not any more expensive to make the combination that you're on than the Premarin. It's probably about the same, the actual production. It's just such a racket. It makes me so mad. And the fact that we're just so or undereducated about our own bodies and the natural process that our own bodies go through also makes me really upset. But I think it is changing. I really think women younger than us are getting the benefit of our experiences and our mother's experience. Did your mother talk to you about your body or about hormones or about anything, like from the beginning, like from your period to menopause, or did you just have to find out on your own?
Well, she did, but she was always just a little bit late because I was precocious and curious. And I got like most of my sex and physical education directly from two of my favorite babysitters. When I had my first period, my parents were off on vacation and had left me with a college student babysitter. And I was so relieved because I would have been mortified by the whole, my baby's a woman now. Like that would have just killed me. So to have a really cool college girl be like, oh, okay, do you use tampons or pads? And be like, I don't know. And she's like, okay, I'll get a bunch and we'll see which ones you like. And just have her be so cool and nonchalant about it. It was like, okay, okay, this is good. I can live with this.
Are you now passing your cool auntie vibe on to the college students that you are encountering?
I find that I don't really need to. These young women are so much more like in touch with their gender and their sexuality and their bodies, and they have access to more information than we did.
Sure.
And for whatever other struggles they're having, and they're definitely having them, finding a decent source of truthful and useful information about their bodies is not one of them.
So we've made a lot of progress since the 90s, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Please let it continue.
You just turned 50. What's been your biggest lesson from between 40 and now?
I think kind of the realization that I don't need to ask permission. I don't need to, and this is what personally, professionally, this is like in every facet. I don't have to get anybody's okay to do what I want to do. I'm allowed to make decisions for myself. I mean, certainly, yeah, there are some decisions that you want a partner's input in. There are certain decisions that you don't make unilaterally. And, part of aging is having the wisdom to discern which, when those situations are, and what you can just say, nope, I'm doing it this way. But I think a lot of it comes down to confidence. And as I've gotten older, I've just gotten more confident every year, and have finally given myself permission. Like, you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You don't have to run this by anybody. You don't have to ask for feedback. You can just make the decision, and it's okay.
You really are going to be the queen of the Crone age.
Love it. I'm ready.
You are ready. Now I'm going to step into our lightning round before we wrap up. So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Alrighty.
Coffee or tea?
Tea only.
Tea only.
Tea only.
With milk, like British, or?
Depends on the tea.
All right.
I have some that that has been a downside of aging, is I can't handle dairy as well as I used to. So I have moved on to oat milk. But yeah, some black teas I do with milk and sugar, and there are other, I almost exclusively do black teas, but some of them are a lighter bodied tea and are just fine on their own with no adulteration.
Nice. Favorite snack?
Oh, I've got them right beside me. What are they? Trader Joe's rolled corn tortilla chips, chili and lime flavored. They're basically knockoff Takis, but I actually think that they're tastier than Takis.
Nice. What is the theme song for this era of your life?
That's a tough one because there's so many good ones. I'm going to have to say, it's a few years old now, but Stay Gold by First Aid Kit.
I haven't heard. I will link
Lovely.
it.
Check it out.
I will. What superpower have you discovered in midlife?
The power of not giving a fuck.
Yes. I love it. Do you implement that power every day? I bet you do.
I try. It's harder than I like. It's hard to break out of decades of conditioning, but it goes along with the lesson of, I don't have to ask permission. I don't have to get feedback. I can make decisions.
Yeah. And
I don't have to care about this.
Self-deprecation once you're post-menopause is almost completely useless.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, nah, I don't need to do this anymore.
That's true.
And if you could get in a time machine and go back to your 30-year-old Kit Kat, what would you tell her?
It's all gonna be fine. It's all gonna be fine.
Think about her 30-year-old, like her little 30-year-old self worries. Do you feel compassion?
They're so small. I feel a lot of compassion, but also a realization that I still didn't have a full picture of life and the world and my role in it at 30. I thought I did because I was 30, 30, you're an adult, you're a grown-up. I was married. Like, we were getting ready to buy a co-op in Queens. Like, I had a career. So you think that you know it all, but no, you still only have, at 30, you still have 1 foot in your 20s. You still have 1 foot in youth, and all the lessons, good or ill, that you've accumulated up to that point they've still got their hooks in you.
Yeah. I think so many people, this is what we'll end with, but I want you to comment on it. I think there's so much pressure, right? To hang on to your young self, hang on to who you were. Don't ever let go of that identity. What do you think gift is in being able to put down the mantle of youth and step into this new phase?
I think of wisdom and perspective.
Oof. Perspective is a good one. I don't always feel wise, but the perspective of just being able to see something in a new way is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I really, really appreciate you coming onto the show. I know that you're not a big social media person, but I appreciate your support and I love talking to you. And you're such an adventurer and I admire you so much. And thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad you're my friend.
You're my friend.
Thank you so much for listening to Your Magical Midlife. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Magical Midlife. You can also check out my offerings on my website, which is www.yourmagicalmidlife.com. I offer individualized coaching for women 45 plus who are seekers, dreamers, and out-of-box thinkers. I also offer luxury retreats that include ritual, rites of passage, and ceremony for women 45 and beyond. I'd be so excited to work with you. Also, if you're feeling kind and you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star review as it opens this podcast to a broader audience and keeps me in those pesky algorithms. Thank you so much for your partnership with me. I appreciate you. Have a great week. Thanks again for listening to Your Magical Midlife. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Magical Midlife. You can check out my offerings on my website, www.yourmagicalmidlife.com. I offer one-to-one coaching, group coaching, retreats, a blog, and this podcast. Please remember to like, rate, and review to keep me in those algorithms. Have a great week. See you soon.